What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another Battlefield 6 gun guide. In today's episode, we're moving back into the SMG category, and we're going to be taking a deep look at the USG-90 based on the FNP-90, and then toward the end of the video, I'm going to be sharing a couple excellent attachment combinations to try out. And starting it off, as always, let's have a look at our raw power potential, and this gun has a rate of fire of 899 rounds per minute. That's not bad at all. It's a little bit better than average for an SMG. However, it's a fairly low damage gun. It's going to take us 5 to 8 shots to kill, depending on the range. And what this means for our time to kill potential is up close, this is 267 milliseconds, which is definitely on the slower side for an SMG, but it's not the slowest killing SMG in the game. Whereas at long ranges, once we get out to an 8-shot kill, we're going to be killing in 467 milliseconds, which is actually a little better than average for SMGs. So while this may not excel compared to the other SMGs in very close quarter situations, once you get out to those mid to longer ranges, this gun does start to stand out compared to other SMGs. And speaking of ranges, let's have a look at our range profile here relative to the other SMGs, and there's really no surprises here. We have the exact same damage range drop-off points as all of the other SMGs, with the one exception being the PW7A2. But the big thing to point out here is we have quite a big range window where it's a 7-shot kill, since that accounts for 2 different damage ranges on this gun. And what that means is you're going to see a lot of consistency with this in those mid-ranges, and that's really where this tends to shine relative to the other SMGs. Now, something that supports that really nicely is its muzzle velocity is actually second best in the SMG category at 570 meters per second. That's really solid for an SMG. Whereas for hipfire, this is just the same as all of the other SMGs out there. And while the nice part about hipfiring with this gun is we have a massive magazine, which we'll talk about in a little bit, unfortunately, with it being a 5-shot kill up close, it's just not going to kill as effectively with hipfire as many of the other SMGs out there that have, in some cases, a faster fire rate and a higher damage value, so they require fewer shots to kill. Now, that of course doesn't mean never hipfire with this gun. Hipfiring is still very viable within the appropriate ranges. It's just not an area where I'd say this gun like dominates or really excels. Now, after that, let's have a look at recoil, and this gun actually does quite well in the recoil department. I wouldn't say it's the most accurate SMG out there, but as you can see from the recoil plot, there's not a whole lot of horizontal deviation with this, and not a whole lot of spread either, especially early on in the recoil plot. There's very little spread there, and it kicks essentially just straight upward with very few gaps in between those shots. So it's very easy to manage and control this recoil in my experience, and that does allow you to stretch out to those like medium ranges again, and that really helps solidify this as that medium range SMG. After that, let's have a look at our handling stats, and across the board, it's pretty standard here. However, I do want to point out we have an excellent magazine capacity at 50 rounds. And that's probably the most unique thing about this gun is the huge magazine capacity by default relative to the rest. Although a downside with that is we do have the slowest reload time in the SMG category at 3 seconds. So you won't have to reload as often as many of the other SMGs, but when you do, you'll want to plan those reloads a little more carefully. Now, it is also worth noting when we're talking magazine here, this is your only option on this gun. There are no other magazine attachments, so you can't get a fast mag attachment, you can't increase or decrease that capacity at all for some other benefits. This is it. That's all you get is a standard 50-round mag. But then finally, for our base multiplayer stats, when it comes to our mobility, unsurprisingly, we just have the same mobility stats as all of the other SMGs, and that means we have excellent mobility with this gun. And with all of that out of the way, we can finally get into some basic REDSEC stats. Against 2 armor plates, this gun is going to be a 10 to 15 shot kill, giving us a slightly worse than average time to kill in close quarters versus the other SMGs, but a slightly better than average time to kill at long ranges relative to other SMGs. And again, this gun really tends to excel at those mid to longer ranges relative to the other SMGs, not relative to like assault rifles or LMGs, of course. But the thing about REDSEC is it's not all about time to kill potential. A couple other things this gun has going for it for REDSEC specifically are that muzzle velocity. That makes a big difference because your gunfights tend to be a little bit on the longer range side. And then going along with that, it's got excellent recoil and a solid magazine capacity. That's probably most important here is the solid magazine capacity, because that 50-round mag will very comfortably allow you to get kills without having to reload, and in some cases even multiple kills against fully armored enemies if you're not missing too many shots. Now, with all of that covered, we can finally move into a couple excellent attachment combinations, and the first one I wanted to share for you guys is my close range build, and I really like this one. With this reason, the Mini Flex Optic, we've got the CQB suppressor on there so we can stay off the radar, and this just makes sure we're not hurting our hipfire spread at all, so it allows us to hipfire effectively, especially when combined with the 50 milliwatt blue laser. That's going to be helping our hipfire spread and also our aimed outside spread when moving. which combines nicely with the light barrel, which is also going to help a lot in that area. So there will be very little movement penalty to your aim down sight spread with this, and that means you can strafe in gunfights, you can slide and jump and do all those things without having to worry about your shot suddenly going at a weird angle out of your barrel. For our magazine, of course, we have the only option there, the 50-round mag. We've also got the lightweight ammo on here. That allows us to strafe a little bit faster in gunfights. And again, we don't really need to worry about the movement penalties to our aim down sight spread when combined with that. And then finally, we're just topping this off with the mag catch, which gives us a slightly faster but still slow for an SMG reload time at 2.82 seconds. So that one is quite solid if you want to be more on the aggressive side and you want to implement a lot of movement into your gunfights. However, the other one is designed to really lean into the strengths of this gun, and this one is designed more for mid-range engagements. So with it, I'm using the ROM 1.75 optic for that little bit of extra magnification. We've got the light and suppressor here to keep us off the radar while also helping with recoil a bit. And that's another thing I haven't mentioned yet. There's no underbarrel attachments on this gun, and therefore not too many ways you can improve your recoil, so it is nice to do that with the light and suppressor. For our barrel, we have the heavy extended barrel, which helps with our aim down sight spread as well as our velocity value. So that really helps us stretch those ranges out confidently. We're once again using the 50 milliwatt blue laser, largely because we just don't have too many attachment options and I had some spare points, and it's a solid option to put on there. So if I do want to move a little bit in my gunfights, I'm not going to be seeing as much spread, and also I can hip fire if needed. Then of course we have the standard magazine on there, and then finally we're topping this off with hollow point for boosted headshot damage, so a little more consistency with headshots, and then again we have that mag catch for the slightly faster reload time. And there we go. That is going to wrap it up today's gun guide on the USG-90. And when it comes to my thoughts on this gun, well, it's definitely not my favorite SMG if I'm trying to play like I'm using an SMG, like really aggressively, trying to keep myself in very close quarters engagements. In those cases, there are several other SMGs I would rather have in my hands simply because they're killing faster up close. But at the end of the day, this gun still holds its own just fine in close quarters engagements, and it performs really well in those mid-ranges. And I think the thing I like about it most is that magazine capacity. It's very refreshing to be able to get a bunch of kills without having to constantly worry about getting reloads in. Now, of course, those are just my thoughts on this SMG, and I'd love to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about the P90 in Battlefield 6 so far? Do you guys generally like this, or maybe not so much? Also, if you guys have missed any of the previous gun guides, I will leave a link to the playlist in the description of the video, and I've covered most of the guns in the game at this point. But I want to polish off the SMGs, so I've got two more to cover. I have the UMG-40 and the KV-9, so please let me know which of those two you'd like me to cover next. If you enjoyed this one, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.